I used to love late-night walks on the beach. There was something peaceful about it. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore, the cool night air, the way the world felt quieter. That changed last summer. I was staying at my family's beach house in a small coastal town, the kind of place that felt untouched by time. I'd been going there since I was a kid, and I knew the beach like the back of my hand. That night, around 11 p.m., I decided to take one of my usual walks. It was foggy, thicker than I'd ever seen before. The kind of fog that turns the world into a blurry, shifting haze. But I wasn't scared. I had my flashlight, my phone, and my feet knew the way. As I walked along the shoreline, I started to notice something. It was quiet. Too quiet. The waves were still there, but muted. The wind had died down. Even the occasional distant laughter from other beachgoers was gone. I was alone. Then I saw the footprints. At first I thought they were mine, but the spacing was off. These prints were fresh, deep, leading from the dunes to the water, and they weren't alone. There was another set beside them. But something about them was wrong. They weren't shaped like feet. I shined my flashlight along the path. The second set of prints was long, almost clawed, like something had been dragging itself alongside whoever made the human tracks. A cold dread settled in my stomach. I told myself it was just my imagination, but something deep inside me knew better. I kept walking, slower now. The fog was getting thicker, swirling in strange patterns. That's when I heard it. A wet, slithering sound. It was faint, just beyond the veil of fog, but it was there. A dragging noise, like something heavy was being pulled through the sand. I turned around. My flashlight cut through the mist, illuminating the empty shore. No footprints, no movement. Then the sound came again, closer. I swung the light in the direction of the noise, and for a split second, I saw something. A shape, tall, impossibly thin, with long, twisting limbs that looked like they belonged to something that had never seen the light of day. Its skin was slick and dark, like it had just crawled out of the ocean. And the worst part, it was standing where my footprints had been, like it was following me. My body went cold. Every instinct screamed at me to run. I turned and sprinted toward the dunes, the sand dragging at my feet. The wet sound behind me quickened. It was moving, fast. I didn't dare look back. I just ran, pushing myself harder than I ever had. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't stop until I reached the wooden boardwalk leading back to my house. Only then did I glance over my shoulder. The fog had swallowed everything. The beach, the footprints, the thing, gone. But I swear, just before I turned away, I saw something shift in the mist. A tall, shadowy figure standing at the water's edge, watching. I don't take late-night walks on the beach anymore. I grew up near the coast, so the beach has always been a place of comfort for me. The sound of the waves, the salty air, felt like home. But after what happened last summer, I don't think I'll ever set foot on a beach at night again. It was mid-August, and my friends and I had planned a late-night bonfire on a secluded stretch of shore. It was just us, the moon, and the endless black waves. The air was warm, the fire crackled, and we drank cheap beers while swapping ghost stories. It felt like any other summer night, until I wandered off by myself. I wasn't trying to be dramatic or anything. I just needed a break from the noise. The ocean looked peaceful, almost hypnotic, under the moonlight. So I strolled closer to the water's edge. My feet sank into the cold, wet sand as I stared out at the horizon. That's when I saw it. A figure standing in the waves. At first, I thought it was a swimmer. but something felt off. The figure stood motionless, half submerged in the water, facing the shore. No movement, no sound, just standing there. A chill ran down my spine. I glanced back toward my friends, their laughter carrying through the night. When I turned back to the ocean, the figure was closer. It hadn't moved, not in the way a person would anyway. It was just closer. I stepped back instinctively, my breath hitching. It was still too dark to make out details, but I could see that its skin was pale, almost grey, and its hair hung in long, stringy clumps over its face. Then, the worst part, it lifted its arm and waved at me. Not a normal wave. It was slow, deliberate, wrong. I took another step back, my heart hammering against my ribs. The figure kept waving. The motion was unnatural, like its arm was bending in the wrong places. Then, all at once, it dropped its arm and lurched forward. I ran. I sprinted back toward the bonfire, nearly tripping over myself in the sand. My friends turned to me, confused. "What's wrong?" one of them asked. I spun around, gasping for air. The figure was gone. The waves rolled in and out, empty. Just the dark ocean stretching endlessly before us. I tried to explain what I saw, but they just laughed it off. "Dude, you had one too many beers," someone said. "Probably a trick of the light." But I know what I saw. The thing in the water wasn't just some drunk swimmer or my imagination playing tricks on me. Because when I turned back one last time, just before we left, there, far out in the ocean, just barely visible under the moonlight, it was waving again. I've never been a superstitious person, but after what happened to me last summer, I don't think I'll ever set foot on a beach at night again. It was late August, and my friends and I had rented a beach house for the weekend. It was one of those secluded places, far from the busy boardwalks and tourist traps. The kind of spot where the only sound at night is the waves crashing against the shore. The first night, we had a bonfire on the sand, drinking and telling dumb stories. By midnight, everyone was heading back to the house, but I wasn't tired yet. The idea of having the whole beach to myself was too tempting, so I stayed behind. The fire was dying down, and the moon cast this pale glow over the sand. It was peaceful at first. I walked along the shoreline, letting the cold water lap at my feet. The air smelled of salt and seaweed. The only footprints in the sand were my own. Then I noticed something. Up by the dunes, where the grass grew wild and tall, someone was standing there. A dark figure, still as a statue. I stopped walking, my heart picking up speed. "Hey," I called, trying to sound casual. No response. It was hard to tell in the dim light, but something about the way they stood was wrong. Their posture was stiff, unnatural, and they were facing me. I took a step back toward the house. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching. I don't know how long I stared, frozen in place, before I finally convinced myself it was just some other beachgoer. Maybe a fisherman or another night owl like me. Trying to shake the unease, I turned my back to the dunes and continued walking along the shore. That was my mistake. After a few minutes, I felt it. That deep, primal sensation of being watched. I turned my head slightly, just enough to glance back without making it obvious. The figure was gone. I stopped dead in my tracks, my breath caught in my throat. The dunes were empty. The wind rustled the tall grass, but there was no sign of anyone standing there. A chill ran through me, and I started walking faster. The beach house wasn't far, just a few minutes away. I told myself I was being stupid, that I had imagined it. But then, I heard footsteps, not behind me, beside me, in the sand, just beyond the water's reach. Bare feet, moving in sync with mine. I whipped my head around expecting to see someone next to me, but there was no one. Nothing but the open beach. The footsteps continued, slow, deliberate, and they were getting closer. I broke into a sprint. The house was in sight now, a dark silhouette against the night. I didn't dare look back. I ran up the wooden steps, yanked the sliding door open, and slammed it shut behind me. The house was silent. My friends were asleep. I locked every door, every window, then stood there in the darkness, panting. After a few minutes, I forced myself to look outside. The beach was empty. The dunes were still. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I told my friends what had happened. They laughed it off, saying it was probably a trick of the light or my imagination playing with me. I wanted to believe them. But later that afternoon, as we packed up to leave, I took one last walk down to the shore, and that's when I saw them. Footprints. A single trail of bare footprints, starting from the dunes and stopping right where I had been walking the night before. But here's the thing. There were no prints leading away.